Hey everyone, and welcome to day two of the week-long virtual GPT Dreamin' event. I'm Mark Good, and today I have the absolute privilege of introducing Chris Pearson as our next speaker. As the Director of Salesforce Development at Jostens and founding member of the Salesforce AI Brain Trust, Chris Pearson joins us with 15 years of experience in business application development and leads a team of professionals navigating the Salesforce and ethical use of AI. Chris is an early adopter of generative AI and has been working on delivering custom AI solutions for his organization. So please join me in welcoming Chris. Give him a warm welcome in the chat, and welcome to the stage, Chris.
Topic of today is all about harnessing AI for your org. I want to talk about how you can get the most value out of AI for your role, whether you're an admin, whether you're a developer, a BA, consultant, or any of the other roles working in the Salesforce ecosystem. Hope you'll find value out of all the details we discussed today. Let's go through a little bit of what we want to cover. So first, I want to break it down. We really want to talk about how does AI work? Because we got to know how it works if we're going to exploit it. And the same thing goes with Salesforce, right? Before we develop or configure on that platform, we need to know how it works so we can make things work. Next, I want to talk about what you should know about accessing AI, the different ways that you can access some of the market leaders, as well as what to consider from a data privacy standpoint. Then I want to give you all some tips, and stick around because I've got some giveaways that will automatically upgrade the quality of the answers that you get if you're using ChatGPT. So I'll give you some tips and tricks on using that and how to get the most out of your generative AI usage. And then finally, wrap up with how do you get started with AI, connecting it with your org? And what do those options look like? I'll give you a couple little options that are, of course, free to get started. So let's go ahead and move on. First, all right, let's talk about the backbone of AI, the generative AI. What makes up the generative AI and what we know as ChatGPT or Bard or Gemini or all those names that we're hearing today? Well, it's what's called a large language model. And I like to think of that as imagine the world's largest library filled with all of the publicly available documents. Think about all the academic papers, all of the help documents, all of the PhD theses, the books in the public domain. Tons of knowledge is what makes up these LLMs. And these LLMs, they accept prompts. So they work in a way which we call multimodal. What does multimodal mean? Multimodal means that you can accept inputs in different modes or forms. So they can accept primarily text, but they also can accept images, files, and other different file content formats. But then what happens is they take that text and then they perform a statistical algorithm to predict what the outcome is going to be. And that's really important for you as an AI connoisseur, because that's what you'll be after the end of this session. You'll be an expert. But to know that AI is simply trying to predict what the outcome is going to be. It's not the most correct answer. And I hear this and I see this a lot of people getting frustrated at the answers they're getting from generative AI. And it's really more of a prediction engine. So maybe we can give you some examples and help break that down further. Is anyone familiar with the game show Family Feud? I'm a big game show nerd myself. This game works in a way where two teams are competing against each other, and a survey has been performed on a certain topic, and these team members have to guess what the most likely answers are to those surveys. So like think like things you'd find in the bathroom. So if we was to think statistically, what would you find in the bathroom? Soap, toothbrush, shampoo, things like that. That's a little bit of a flavor of kind of how AI works, or generative AI works. But another way of thinking about it that I like to also use is autocorrect on steroids, because it really is very powerful for being able to predict and correct that text that you're working with. So let's have a little bit of fun, right? Let's kind of try and let's mix it up a little bit with breaking it down with a demonstration of an example here using predicting text. So in this session, I've got plenty of people that that don't know me. And there may be some people that know me or know that my dry sense of humor or have worked with me in the past. I hope there's a couple people out there that know me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a phrase, and you can use the chat to complete that phrase. And so here it is. I'm going to play the feud, so to speak. Can you predict the words that are going to come out of my... All right, the Wi-Fi didn't freeze there. I stopped. I was pausing, letting see what are some of those answers. Let me pop open the chat or whatever. Mouth, mouth, mouth. Okay, yes. Statistically, mouth was the correct word. But however, this diverse audience that's on the session today, they may have chosen other body parts, right? And that same thing applies to AI. It's coming up with all the possible permutations, but picking the highest likelihood answer. Does that make sense? So let me give you a little bit of another breakdown here. We'll do another game, so to speak. So we're going to jump over here into the OpenAI playground. And I've got a sentence here that needs to be finished. End users of Salesforce love multi-select pick lists. Administrators and developers think pick lists are. So what do I want you to do? What do I want you to do? It's going to be very hard to predict the word, but you can predict the sentiment. Would you say, how about this? Give me a thumbs up in the chat if you think AI is going to have a positive sentiment about administrators and developers' thoughts on multi-select pick lists. And you can do a thumbs down if you think there's a negative connotation. Let me just see what we got. What do we got here? All right, evil, some thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, so let's see what we get. Are a pain in the neck, blah, blah, blah. These are because pick lists are not easy to work. So if you statistically chose negative or like a bad opinion of multi-select pick lists, then you're thinking like AI. And guess what? We can actually see how AI is working with this playground. So what's happening here, we'll talk about this, but it's breaking up all of these words and doing something called tokenizing them. So let's click into what this pain word is. Oh my gosh, what do we see? Statistically, AI said there's a 36% chance that pain is the right word, but we can also see that there's some other thoughts, right? Nightmare, right? Believe me, I've dealt with plenty of nightmare multi-select pick lists from an automation standpoint. Headache, nuisance. So do you see how AI is simply going through the words that it's been provided and then trying to predict what should come after that? All right. So you saw in that playground example where AI was starting to kind of color all those words, and that's what we call tokenization. And these large language models, that's actually that's how they work. That's the currency, so to speak, that you're working with when in AI. And these tokens, they're about 4 characters of words, plus or minus. It totally depends on the word and the punctuation, the capitalization. All different types of things can influence uh, how many tokens are used or how those tokens are processed. But essentially, the system is turning each one of those words into some math, into some mathematical values that it's able to then perform some very complicated math and predict that outcome. And so you start to hear, as you get into working with different AI models, that they'll have different context windows. And a context window is really, think about how much text can the system process at once. Another example would be like, all right, using the bulk API in Salesforce, right? We use that when the record count is over 50,000 records and things like that. We want to maybe use different APIs for different needs. And the same thing goes with AI. So let's start breaking down prompts. I see this, I do feel like there's a lot to learn with what goes into your prompt. So there's actually 2 parts. I know that if you've used ChatGPT, it's just one single text box. But there's actually, the way that AI works is there's 2 different prompts. There's what they call the system prompt. Think about that as like, how do you want the AI to answer you? Or what hat do you want AI to wear? Is it going to be a pastry chef? Is it going to be a legal expert? Is it going to be an expert Salesforce admin, or an expert Salesforce architect, or a DevOps engineer? We talked about how it's a massive library of all that public information. It can then adopt about any role out there that you can think of: proofreader, code generator, QA, project manager, motivational speaker. All of those different hats it can absolutely adopt because it's been trained on all of that data. So you've got your system prompt, and then the user prompt is just you simply asking it what to do. That's the request that you're making of the system. So we'll come back to those 2 points to really drive home how using system prompts and with your user prompts will actually really materially impact the results you're getting with AI. So let's move on. Let's keep moving. Let's talk about, there's so much talk about privacy and security. I don't want my data to be out in public. This is proprietary. And I work within those same constraints. I've got a large org with a lot of proprietary data, and we don't want our code or our knowledge base being out there in the open. And so if you are using like one of the market leading apps, ChatGPT, of which I'm a big fan, and I've got plenty of tips for you on how to continue to exploit that. But your data, if you're on a free, or what they call a plus license, which just means you're paying for yourself, your data is absolutely being used by the model. They're looking at your answers, your feedback, and they're using that to continually improve that model. And so that model will change over time. It's something we kind of have to live with, sort of like 3 releases a year, right? Things are never going to continue to stagnate. However, when you use the API, a different policy applies. This is really important because there's a ton of press on the trust layer. How do we keep data? How do we, in the concepts of trust and keeping my data private? So I've got news for you. If you go out there, OpenAI, these are all links, by the way, in my presentation, but links to the privacy policy, you will see clearly that OpenAI said a while ago, almost a year ago, they will not use any of the data that you are sending via the API to train our models. Okay, that's great. So I'll give you some options later on how to use the API to keep your data out of the prying eyes of the public. But what does that mean? What does that mean? It means that other developers, other apps are using the OpenAI API, and OpenAI at least is not using that data to train their models. There's nothing to be said about whatever third-party provider you are using. Maybe we think about this. By the way, if you don't know me, I love food, like food and food analogies. So a great food analogy is this concept of farm to table. And what that means is, like, if you get your food right from the farm and you get it onto the table, it's going to be fresh and organic. It's likely not going to have to be handled by different other hands. And that concept is really prevalent in eating out and in the restaurant industry. And the same thing applies with OpenAI. If you connect directly to OpenAI using the API, your data is not being used. But brand new as of January this year, in fact, January 10th, they just announced another new license, and that's called the team license. So all they do with that license is they make you buy 2 licenses at a minimum. And guess what? Your data is not used for training these models. So now we've started to lower the barrier from a privacy standpoint. So first it was like, my data is being used. If I'm free, I have to be a developer, I have to use the API. But now there's other options for you, your teams, your organization to explore using generative AI and not being worried about your concerns from a data standpoint. And I get it, this is what they say, but this is what they go to market with. So to me, this is something you can trust. All right, so I talked a little bit about those different ways of accessing generative AI. We all know there's a user interface, right? The simplified user interface. It's a text box. You can have an ongoing conversation with it. It's multimodal. You'll see that little paperclip icon. You can upload attachments and files, Excel documents, and have it review that information and perform whatever request you want. However, when you access things programmatically via the API, you get different things. You get different options. I like to call it, you got more knobs and dials to kind of tune the output. You also have different data retention rules, right? We just talked about that. Like they're not storing your data when you're using it via the API. So that means you have more control over the output. So how do we turn this into an analogy? Think about a smartphone, your smartphone. That user interface of the smartphone is like, whether it's an Apple or an Android or something else, for the most part, it's a fairly clean, easy to use interface. But then if you want to dive into the settings, you can start to change and alter the behavior of that phone. Or if you're really enterprising, you can crack open that phone or like a computer. And if you're an electrical engineer, if you're familiar with hardware, you can start to really change how that device performs. You can overclock the processor. You could make all sorts of adjustments to really have a different experience using that hardware. And what I'm trying to convey is the same thing exists when you're dealing with generative AI programmatically. So let's put that into practice, by the way. Before we move on to this, I thought about one other example of, like, how do we as Salesforce professionals obscure the complex? And I think a perfect example would be our record pages, right? So when you go on a Salesforce record page, you don't have every single screen flow or lightning web component or all 500 of your opportunity fields on the page. Guilty, excuse me. Guilty. Oh, I'm sorry. My allergies are acting up. But right, we don't do that sort of thing. We make our record pages look nice and clean and enticing for users. And so that's what ChatGPT has done with generative AI. So let's jump back into what I'm calling the Salesforce setup page for generative AI. And we can talk about some of those knobs and dials that we saw. So we'll jump into it in just a second, but let me give you a little bit of some vocabulary words that you will see when you're working with generative AI. And guess what? I'm going to show you the ways that you can see the exact parameters. So you can literally adjust these just like number fields or like you're inputting text into a form. But there's also, when you're using the user interface, you don't have all those options. So how do you do it? You have to use your words. So very powerful to be great with your words when you're using generative AI. So temperature. The temperature is a way of thinking about how much creativity should be applied by the generative AI model. I can give you a couple examples. Like if you're in a legal or a medical or a finance discipline, you need really typically want to use low temperature. Those are domains where we don't typically reward or we won't want a lot of creativity, right? The law is the law. And when it's talking about medical, our human body, we don't want people to be too creative, depending on what kind of treatment you're seeking, I guess. And same with finance. But if you're on the marketing side, or maybe you're using it from an idea generation standpoint, then you do want to use high temperature, right? Because that's more creative. So here we go. We've got my wonderful AI illustration, by the way, but I've got some words down here and I tried to color code them to make sense. Using words like define, explain, at low temperature words. So when you use that, AI is going to interpret that as, oh, I need to lower the temperature here. I need to stick to the facts. But if you use words such as imagine or invent, those are high temperature words where you will get a different output, different type of output. So we'll go through that in just a second. Top P, talk about the most random name possible. But think about this is the range of words to consider. Here's my analogy. Again, coming back to food, sorry. Alphabet soup. Anyone familiar with alphabet soup or Alphabets, the cereal that had letters in it? So think about a big vat of letters, but they're actually words. And when you want a high top P, you're going to scoop out all of those words and you're going to go down to the bottom of the barrel and try and get all of the words that you want the model to consider. And if you have a low top P, you're maybe scraping on the surface. I have a colleague, I think, named Jody Herbeck, who's talking about how she uses $10 words with her admin training. And she had another colleague who was teaching certified technical architects who are using $20 words. So top P is a great way of kind of using that same sort of analogy. What are all and so if you wanted to put that in terms of text, you could say, what are all the possible whatever? And that's kind of the cue for AI to ratchet up the top P. Finally, there you'll see max tokens. Think about this as a way to limit your answer. It's the max, since when you're using the API, you're paying for every token you use. And so when you're a consumer and you're starting to interact with AI on different products or websites, and then you're working with ChatGPT and you get this long, very loquacious, it's my $10 word. That means like very talkative, but if you get a lot of talkative stuff, then that's using up a lot of tokens. But with these parameters, it allows developers to really control the output. So let's just use our little example over here and just see. Maybe we can go, maybe we can ratchet up and see what kind of example we get. Maybe we'll ratchet up that temperature a little bit. Maybe we will change the number of tokens to 225, and let's see what AI is going to get talking to us about pick lists, multi-select pick lists, that is. Pain in the neck, blah, 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 blah. Oh my gosh, like word overflow here. But we get a lot more details. And okay, it's starting to be a little bit more creative. I not only is it just being more talkative, but well, it's kind of giving me a little bit of history. I couldn't have told you. I didn't know that you couldn't use multi-select pick lists in Apex before the winter release. So interesting, interesting. So these types of settings allow the developers to control the output. And so if you understand how this works, then you understand how every single product out there that's using generative AI works. We're talking about early on in the talk, those prompts and that system and user prompt. And I told you I wanted to revisit that. So I've got a couple examples to prove what's the value of having just a user prompt and a system prompt. And so we'll go take a look at that. So here we go. We have a simple request of the system. I'm asking the system to create a flow that will automatically create opportunity contact roles for every contact related to the account that has a campaign member created date within 60 days of the opportunity. And I want all of that to happen when the opportunity moves to a closed status. All right, so there's some complexity with this request, but it can be done, right, with Flow. And so I've asked AI to give me the output of that. And so let's just take a look. We'll skim this. I won't bore you with all of the details, but all right. So ChatGPT says you want an automation task within Salesforce. By the way, did you notice I didn't say anything about Salesforce in my first prompt? Keep that in mind. Tells me to start a new flow, define the trigger, do a get element. Then you're going to have to loop through those contacts. Then you're going to have to do something to get on the campaign members. Then you need to do your record creation at the end, save and activate. And yes, test this out in the sandbox. Okay. I would say, if I was going to give that a thumbs up, thumbs down, I'd give that kind of like about a medium score. That'll sort of work if someone's relatively experienced. So let's jump over. Now let's apply a system prompt. Now look at my words. System. Act as an expert Salesforce administrator with over 10 years of experience designing scalable automations using the appropriate automation tool. I don't want to hear anything about workflow or process builder. You apply all best practices around error handling, bulkification, avoid hard coding IDs or implementing other structures that we don't like, and you provide detailed instructions as to what steps need to be taken and why. Again, I've given it more context. So, all right. Well, ChatGPT is a lot more enthusiastic, but look at this. Now we start to say, define the requirements. Okay, it's starting to think a little bit more like a human because we told it to. And it gives me the instructions on how to do things and kind of walks me through similar. But then I also see down here, error handling. I didn't get that in the first go around, because I didn't specify that. Again, it's predicting text based upon what you give it. You don't tell it, it's not going to know to do that. It's not going to go out of its way to do that. So Not to mention, okay, thanks for the best practices, ChatGPT as well. All right, so it's like, hey, we're avoiding all those things you told me to avoid. If you saw that system prompt, I typed about a paragraph about being a Salesforce admin with over 10 years and don't do this and don't do that. I don't know if that's a lot to type over and over again. And I wouldn't like to do that because sometimes you're asking it questions about being a Salesforce admin, and maybe you may be asking it other questions about like how to do something in Jira, or how do I do something in VS Code, or how do I use GitHub, or things like that. That one set of instructions is really kind of could be painful to type over and over again. So ChatGPT and OpenAI have come out with something that they call custom instructions. And this is available whether you're a free or paid user. So there's no reason not to use it. And it saves you time. And it's really quite simple. It's literally 2 questions. What would you like ChatGPT to know about you to provide a better response? And how would you like it to respond? This is the killer time saver. I know these questions are the most open-ended things, but what if we were able to come up with text instructions, because that's all this is. Text instructions forces AI, forces the generative AI to adopt the right mode, put on that right hat, and not only give us an answer that's a lot more nuanced, with a lot more depth, but allows us to really interact with that. And that's what I'm here to tell you about. It's for free if you just keep sticking with me. And that's what we call expert level custom instructions. So let's jump over to what those look like. So notice my prompt. There's no system prompt. It's the same words. Explain in detail how to create a flow that does this and that and the other. Now let's look at the response and let's see what we get. Automatically, this looks different. So the AI has not only identified, okay, some possible expert roles. It's then come up with some possible keywords. It's restated my problem, probably a little bit more eloquently in a question. Then it's detailed all the plan that it's going to work off of. This is all because it was instructed to. And by the way, this table is really easy to read. This is called Markdown. I instructed it to give me these instructions using a Markdown table. So we'll talk about all the value that this gives you in just a second. But now we can go through all of the steps that it gave me. Tells me all of the stuff. I see my error handling. It even mentions things about testing. It also gives me some additional, now these Google hyperlinks, unfortunately, I think they don't work on the desktop site, but they do work on the mobile site. I think that has to do with something to do with OpenAI and Google maybe not getting along exactly. But let's keep going through this. So we got a really nuanced, deep expertise answer. But notice, I just used the / command of help. Now there are additional instructions that I've given it. I've given it some commands that I want AI to offer me. So look, it'll let me, I can say /review. So I can ask the AI to not only review what it just said, but then correct things. Or I can ask it to redo things if I don't like the answer. I can do all sorts of things with these / commands that are embedded in my custom instructions. I think what's really interesting is this like /arg, which allows you to force the AI to take like an argumentative stance on the topic. So we'll move down these. I love this. There's a verbosity control. So v equals 1. Think about that. I call that Chris Pearson on a Monday. Yeah, my weekend was good. How was yours? I'm pretty brief on a Monday morning. But then you can ratchet that up to V equals 5, and that's going to be the most talkative. That's the thing about Chris on a Friday. He's telling you about the happy hour he's going to, all the food he's going to eat this weekend, what his weekend plans are, all sorts of that. And so you can go through these details and see all these commands and really get AI working for you with these expert custom instructions. So they have been a game changer for me using generative AI. So we talked about what does it do? It optimizes and restates your request. It automatically identifies the right expert personas, which is great because you don't want to have someone giving you an answer that's not an expert. That's probably going to lead to some frustration. And all those keywords that it identified. Think about that as like Popeye eating his spinach. Popeye eats his spinach, he gets stronger. So all of those words are basically the AI saying, okay, here are all the words. I'm going to stay in this area of the model because this model is gigantic and there's all this knowledge, but all these keywords, they're all similar. Yes, I want to stay over here and give you an answer from that. So you're like anchoring the AI in the right context. Told you about the verbosity controls, slash commands. So anybody like Salt Bay? This will be you with these expert custom instructions. I promise you, and your prompts and your answers will get better. So how do I get these installed, Chris? Does anybody know who Clippy is? Totally dates me, but it was a character that Microsoft did many years ago. We won't speak about that. But all you have to do is cut and paste text, because that's how AI works. It's text-based. So I've got these links in my presentation that will work for free or paid users. Let's just take a look at where they go. They take you to Dustin Miller. He's the creator of this. He gives it away for free, by the way. And I'm looking at GitHub. And oh gosh, this is just text. All this is text. You're welcome to read. You can even adjust these on your own, but literally all you have to do is cut and paste these instructions into ChatGPT. It's so easy. And you can get there clearly by clicking your name, custom instructions, and then pasting those there. All right. So we've talked about so much. We've talked about like how AI works. We talked about data privacy, giving you ideas on how to get some more value or more depth and more improvement in my answers. So let's talk about prompt quality, because that really does impact things. So this screenshot over here is a lot of words, but it can be summed up by saying no matter how many different LLMs are created, whoever's going to have the next one that's going to have 10 billion pieces of data or 1 trillion or whatever. But what the engineers that are working on this say is it all comes down to the data you feed it, which can be the prompt, which really is the prompt. My colleague, Ian, who's speaking later today, I believe, created an article about this. The power of GPT is the prompt. It's within your hands as an author, as someone who's writing these prompts. And that is going to impact things. So what if we could, how do we use this and actually prove this out? So there's all these different LLMs out there. Can we actually prove like a trained LLM? Training an LLM can be different, can mean different things, but at the end of the day, you're just giving this big giant model instructions and you're saying, this is what you're gonna do. This is what you're good at. So can we prove that a trained LLM is going to be better in certain areas than just the generic foundational model? So let's talk about how we can do that. GPTs, these GPTs is something that OpenAI has come up with, and they allow consumers or developers, but low-code professionals, to create AI agents or chatbots, and they're trained for a specific task. And training them is very simple. It's just giving it instructions. Now you can go crazy and you can have these things, make API calls or do external actions and all of that. But in its simplest form, these GPTs are just following instructions. So here's a screenshot of just some examples of some GPTs that are available with ChatGPT. You can get ones that'll create a diagram for you or help you with slides. But what I have done is I started using these custom GPTs, and I wanted to understand what makes them so special. Why should I use them for this purpose versus using the foundational model? Because I'm a skeptic by nature. So what I did was I used AI to come up with this self-assessment prompt. We'll take a look at it in just a second. But think about this prompt as making AI look in a mirror. This is me holding a mirror. And what that GPT is going to do, that trained API, it's going to tell you what kind of knowledge it has, what kind of actions it's trained to perform, what a summary of the instructions it was given. We can even make it grade itself and when to use it. Kind of give you a little bit of something to go off of to decide, do I actually want to use this? So there was an example GPT was out there. It was called the Apex Test Class Assistant. I'll jump into this in just a second, but this is a little example of that dynamic strengths and weaknesses table that I got AI to produce. And notice, it is great because this AI has been instructed to help with Apex test classes. It is going to perform better than the generic model because it's been trained. Just like you as Salesforce professionals are going to do a better job when you're trained versus, hey, go create a custom object. I don't even know what that means. So what this is proving to you is that a trained LLM is going to be better at certain things. And there are things that it's also not as good at. We can see down here, it gave itself 4 stars on general responsiveness. That's because it said, hey, you told me just to focus on Apex or Apex test classes. So this prompt is available out there. I've got the link. You are welcome to cut and paste this and use it. It is a lot of text to ask AI, but it works. And you can see exactly this Apex test class assistant. No, it's not doing anything. It's not using my data, not doing anything else. But look, what is it doing? Does it have any additional knowledge? So someone, when they created this Apex test class agent, they gave it 2 documents around the developer guide and the reference guide. All right, moving on, some helpful GPTs that I thought were really helpful. So Ian is running a site that lists all of those GPTs that are really helpful for Salesforce professionals. Believe me, I made many of them self-assess, which is really interesting to see how people are instructing and giving it things and telling it what to do. I really love this auto expert. This is from the creator of those expert custom instructions. What I'm trying to illustrate here was I was asking it a generic question about different project management methodologies. Look at the text. It's identifying additional experts that it's asking, do you want them to come to the table and give you their opinion on your answer? It's like getting to host Thanksgiving dinner with the smartest people that are there to help you with your problem. And then I love this the most, with just literally typing in E, force them to come to a consensus. I can't even do that with my family at Thanksgiving and holidays. I wish I could do this. Couple other ones, Easy Prompt GPT. You can use that to improve your prompts. Generative AI Task Wizard, just getting started with AI. Those are very helpful. All right, So let's wrap up with how do you get this into your org? I'm all about giving you some free options. And when I say free, you have to pay for those tokens. So you do need a credit card, you do need an API key. Right? Like I said, there's not a lot of free options where you don't have to pay something. So what I want to do is give you a couple options. My colleague Vernon Keenan created something called the AI Gateway. I'll show you some screenshots in just a second if there aren't any questions. But this is a great one for beginners. This is really how I started to learn about AI. It's an unmanaged package, which means you can see the code and see how it kind of works. It's very simple. It's like a couple objects, an Apex class, and a screen flow. So it's great for beginners wanting to kind of get start working. But it does support kind of a what they call a legacy API, not their latest and greatest stuff. But what's most powerful is that prompt library. I'll show you that because you really want to pay attention to that. It'll give you great examples. And then another product called GPT-24. So this is the product that I would say this is enterprise ready. I don't know how they're giving away this for free. There's limited features, but you can absolutely work with AI if you're using GPT-24. It's a managed package, but it supports bringing your own model. So maybe you don't want to use OpenAI, maybe you want to use Google's or Meta's. It's got its own built-in data privacy controls. Again, remember my analogy, farm to table. I mean, you want to be concerned, but you don't, your data is not leaving the org. It's also low code implementation, so very easy to quickly get up to speed. So just a quick little, here we are in a sandbox org. This is Vernon's AI gateway. Came with all these wonderful prompt library, this prompt library that you can see. Does it counts all of this? We can take a look at this, one of these individual prompts, which I think should start to open your eyes. We can start to see some answers. Like I was using it to refactor some code. Max tokens, temperature. Again, these are the things that you will see when you're using generative AI. Look at this like system prompt. This is the amount of detail that you need to go into to get a high quality answer. All sorts of detail that Vernon spend on writing these. So I recommend checking it out. Like I said, it's pretty easy to work with. Moving on to GPT-24. This is the GPT-24 app. It comes with its own prompt catalog as well. I was working with it from a case standpoint. So let's just take a quick look over. I'm looking at one of the pre-packaged prompts. Gives me a description. It's got all the details. Again, I see the max tokens and the temperature and the top P. There's a reason why I'm reiterating this, because you're going to see this across the board. And then the context mapping, this is where you feed it information. So this is a root cause analysis prompt. So it makes sense that it's going to consume. You're going to feed it like about 19 fields. You can change what fields you want to send to AI, but then it's looking at the comments as well and the case feed. So think about this. This didn't take any flow work. You're looking for the Salesforce products do require you to build a flow. You have to flatten your objects to get related information and send it to AI. You don't have to do it with GPT-24. So quick little final screenshot here. You can see it's a quick Lightning Web component. Choose your prompt, run it, and you get your answer.